Absolutely. I think that'll be.
Yo soy de...
Hello there. Can you save this so we can hold it, put it in our office? I have the talking point.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is we did not include this in the talking points, but if you want to find time, yesterday we sent this letter. Honduran trade unions was still in Honduras. And we sent this letter with Shakowski, Khan, and McGovern. It's not NAFTA, but it is also another example of how
Big folks, we should try to get
unionists are under attack in the
shorter
region,
folks
not
in
just
the
in
front,
Mexico.
taller folks in the back.
Am I short or tall?
Always a good idea.
I'm not going to decide that, but I'm short.
Where do I go? I don't know.
You got plenty of company.
Well, there you go. I guess
There are more short
keep it
people
in the
than tall
front right
people,
here.
I think, in the world.
That's right. That's
You gotta
right.
stand up for the
Pay
majority.
attention.
All right. Oh, I see I'm first. Okay. Good morning to everyone who is here this morning. I'd like to thank you all for being here. It's great to be with all of you here. And of course, I'm always proud to stand with workers. That is the essence of the people I represent in the 4th District of Illinois, both urban and suburban communities. Today, I'm glad to stand with representatives from a range of labor organizations to demand that the USMCA not be sent to the floor until we can be sure of sufficient labor standards enforcement. Without effective enforcement, the standards are meaningless. The USMCA negotiations provide a rare opportunity to re-examine NAFTA and reset an agreement that has proven deeply damaging to the United States and Mexico. Since NAFTA was approved in 1994, nearly 1 million jobs have been lost in the U.S. Meanwhile, conditions in Mexico for workers have deteriorated. After decades of worker intimidation throughout Mexico and impunity for perpetrators, Mexican manufacturing wages are now 40% lower, not than U.S. workers, than Chinese workers. The disappearance of Oscar Hernández Romero, a union organizer from Guerrero, is a painful reminder that workers in Mexico still need protection. By the way, with respect to protecting union organizers and activists and members, yesterday Congresswoman Shakowski, Pocan, and others, and myself sent in a letter of concern demanding an investigation into the murder of a trade unionist in Honduras. So it is in that spirit that I make that point. The disappearance of Oscar Hernández Romero is of great concern, and it cannot be emphasized enough. Strong labor rights and enforcement in the USMCA would help counter the violence against workers and improve the lives of Mexican and U.S. working people. We have the chance to repair the damage that NAFTA has done, but only if we have it in writing and the deal is strong for workers in both countries. As a Mexican-born U.S. citizen, I truly care about this idea that we need to raise the living standards of both countries and its working people. Since Donald Trump announced the NAFTA 2.0 last year, he has stonewalled calls to strengthen labor rights and add real enforcement mechanisms to protect workers. My colleagues and I have been clear. USMCA must have strong labor standards, or it will not earn our vote. When 26 colleagues joined me in a letter this past June to Ambassador Lighthizer to state these concerns, we made the same demand as we make today. Strong labor standards and a swift and certain enforcement mechanism are essential to win congressional support of USMCA. I stand in solidarity with workers like Oscar Hernández Romero. Let's keep organizing. Let's keep pushing. Si se puede. Labor labor enforcement or no deal. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Chris Shelton, President of the Communication Workers of America. President Shelton.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. I'm happy to be here today with Congressman Garcia and with these other great leaders and with all these workers behind me. For too long, our brothers and sisters in Mexico have been denied their fundamental right to organize into unions. For many Mexican workers, they deal with the same problems workers in the United States face, only worse. It's almost impossible to form a real democratic union in Mexico, and will remain so until real resources are devoted to protect unions, to protect the rights of workers to form democratic unions in Mexico. Other workers in Mexico, it's literally a matter of life and death. Mexican workers who try to form democratic unions often face threats of violence, and many have lost their lives. The murders of 3 workers at Media Luna mine and the disappearance of Oscar Hernández Romero are only the latest example of attacks on workers in Mexico. Yet little is done to secure justice for those workers. Police officials do not appear to even be looking to find Oscar or to find those who caused his disappearance. In fact, our own State Department has found that there is a culture of impunity for violence against workers and independent journalists in Mexico. The truth is, the corporations and politicians who have created this culture of impunity for violence against workers are very committed to preventing workers from exercising their rights. They will not change their ways quietly. As we are negotiating a deal to replace NAFTA, we must use this opportunity to secure rights and justice for our brothers and sisters in Mexico. That means that the Mexican government must do its part and investigate unresolved cases of violence against Mexican unionists. It also means a commitment of real funding to ensure that legal changes to protect workers' rights are actually implemented. And finally, it means that the agreement must include a strong enforcement mechanism that covers all workers, works quickly, and includes strong penalties for those who violate it. CWA members know that corporations are most interested in one thing, their bottom line. If they can increase their profits by exploiting workers in inhumane conditions and turn a blind eye to violence against activists, they'll even do that. So we stand in full solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Mexico who are looking to exercise their rights. We call on Congress to ensure that any NAFTA deal genuinely protect the rights of workers in Mexico and put in enforcement to make sure that those rights and what we sign is actually an agreement that will work. So thank you for being here, and si se puede.
Si se puede. All right. Yes, sir. Next, we have Sister Quincy Howard, Network for Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. Sister?
Hi, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres. Loosely translated, this truism means tell me who you go with and I'll tell you who you are. Our lawmakers are being asked this question with the negotiations of NAFTA 2.0. Which interests are you going with? In a globalized economy, are we with corporations, or do we stand in solidarity with workers who are human beings? Right now, lawmakers must decide if the U.S. will play a productive role in making sure that NAFTA 2.0 is a system that upholds the dignity of all people. As economics expands, so does our responsibility. As a nation, our ethics cannot be situational. And in a global economy where capital is free-flowing, the interests of labor have become integrally bound together. The total lack of enforceable labor of enforceable labor rights in the original NAFTA agreement, we heard, resulted in Mexican manufacturing wages that are 40% lower than in China. It's also resulted in outsourcing nearly 1 million U.S. jobs to exploit those artificially low wages. We can no longer separate the exploitation of Mexican workers from artificially suppressed wages for American workers. Catholic social teaching calls for a society that cares for and protects the most vulnerable members of the socioeconomic order. And the truth of globalization is that as the system expands, we are also called to broaden our purview of concern for those vulnerable members. As I stand here, a follower of Christ, I'm asking lawmakers to hold strong and insist upon protections for workers in Mexico. They are the most vulnerable stakeholders in these negotiations, and their treatment in turn impacts the fate of workers here in the U.S. In the face of the globalization of labor, Pope Francis calls for global solidarity in the fight against poverty and exploitation. Any lawmaker feeling pressure to accept the current offer needs to ask themselves, if American workers were being murdered by anti-union vigilantes, how would they respond? Our experience to date with globalization is not the panacea of market solutions we were promised. Instead, it's felt like a race to the bottom, with human life and the dignity of work as collateral damage. This shot at renegotiating NAFTA is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to refashion globalism. We will all benefit from this work to reform and build a more just society, one which promotes human dignity and the common good for all. As a Christian, I believe in the possibility of a new creation. People of faith are called to strive for an economy, global or otherwise, that respects the priority of labor over capital, which is nothing less than the primacy of human beings over money. For lawmakers of goodwill...
Questions? Yes, I was. I think President Trump urged the freshman members of the Congress to be careful as he used a football analogy. The last 10 or 7 yards of a drive to the goalpost can be long, can be frustrating, where you can make mistakes and you can give in at a most crucial time. So he cautioned members to stay in solidarity, to demand in writing the final versions of negotiations to ensure, especially on the labor enforcement side, that there are protections for workers in both Mexico and the U.S., so that the important labor reforms that have been enacted by the Mexican legislature and into law are actually implementable, so that they don't erode the quality of life of workers in Mexico, and on the contrary, raise their living standards and protect U.S. workers as well.
I feel like your party leaders are being tempted to make the same mistakes they made with NAFTA, negotiating away too much.
I think there is a recognition that with the looming presidential elections next year, that something needs to happen. But again, I think the caution of President Trump is well taken. We can do better when we stick together. Thank you. Yes.
Peter McConnell this morning said that it would be a mistake to outsource, to use Richard Trump to decide whether or not to pass USMCA. He said Speaker Pelosi was doing that. Do you have a response to that?
I think it's really important to understand that one of the reasons that Donald Trump became president and defied many of the conventional pundits in U.S. politics is precisely because he spoke to the suffering that NAFTA has caused people all over the country, especially working class members who felt that the Congress, the U.S. government hasn't done enough to guarantee the protection of U.S. jobs and the working conditions of the working class in this country. So for Mitch McConnell to say that, to suggest that somehow these are special interests, they're not. People, both union members and people not in unions, understand understand the principle of protecting certain standards of living. Remember that wages in our country over the past 4 decades and earning power have decreased, not increased. That's why we have someone like Trump in the White House today. We cannot repeat those mistakes once again with this trade deal.
Amen.
Any others? Thank you very much. Oh, follow up.
Do you agree with Richard Trumka that the Mexican budget for labor implementation is, he likened it to voodoo economics, and he's saying that a 23% increase is not enough? Would you agree with that?
A 23% increase in?
In labor implementation funding?
I'm not sure if what you're asking is if there is sufficient funding to ensure the capacity and the administrative ability of the Mexican state to ensure that there are fair and transparent elections in all of the workplaces that will be required to do so in over a period of months and years. The answer to that, in my opinion, is that no, it doesn't. The government presently doesn't have the capacity to ensure that there are free elections in all of those workplaces, a key element of free trade unionism in Mexico, and ensuring that workers are not under duress to vote one way or another in Mexico. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, are you at all concerned that groups like the Chamber of Commerce and NAM are kind of trying to jam you guys on this deal by pressuring frontline members to pressure Speaker Pelosi to bring it up for a vote, and as a result you have concerns that it will come up for a vote without having the protections that you're seeking?
I'm very concerned. I think that here you see folks that have access to a lot of capital and to influence media in this country are playing their hand and trying to pressure elected officials, members of Congress, into making a deal that may appear to be a better one than NAFTA, but one that they will come to regret and that the country will come to resent, especially workers, in the years ahead. Thank you. All righty. Thank you. Got to run back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Can I give you my card? Sure. Why not, right? That's all right.
No, como él dijo, está bajando, no les aumenta. Eso no es justo porque la mayoría todo cuesta más y más y más.